Dear Kevin Feige, I'm not sure if your address is still the same since the first letter I sent, but I'm sure this one will make it to you regardless, one way or the other. I'm writing you again because it's become blatantly obvious that you've either chosen not to read the first letter that I sent you, or you have and you've continued on your path out of spite. I'm gonna go with the former. I feel like, look, you're a busy guy, I get it. There's probably a lot on your plate. Not even probably, there's definitely a lot on your plate. But whichever it is, the current state of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has warranted a follow-up. Trust that neither you nor I want me to be writing this letter, but alas, here we are. Now, while it is true that we've technically only had 2 new theatrical additions to the MCU since the last time we talked, we find ourselves on the precipice of the point of no return.
And I'm the only hope he has.
Before we jump into the issues the MCU is currently facing, today's video wouldn't be possible without a little help from our friends at Opera. And today we're going to be talking about the latest version of Opera's desktop browser that incorporates a completely redesigned look and brand new functionality. With new features like tab islands to easily organize your projects, searches, and workspace, and the browser's new modular design, Opera now adapts to your browsing to provide more space, intuitive navigation, and smooth interaction. Much like how our favorite Marvel heroes are always out there to protect us while we live our daily lives, Opera comes with a free VPN and ad blocker already installed to keep you safe while you silver surf the web. See what I did there? Have a James Gunn level need to make new playlists? Well, Opera offers easy access to all of your favorite players, including Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, and many more. There's a world of music available at your fingertips at all times. And Opera knows that it's a hassle changing browsers. I mean, in this economy, who has the time? Which is why Opera allows you to seamlessly integrate your search history, contacts, and saved information from your old browser so you don't have to waste valuable time you could be using to watch another Marvel project with transferring your data instead. Opera even comes with an integrated AI, Aria, already installed. With Aria, Opera users are getting access to a leading generative AI service for free. The service is a result of Opera's collaboration with OpenAI, but with expanded capabilities upon ChatGPT. As opposed to other browser solutions, the AI in Opera is a user-controlled experience, which means users can choose to opt into AI service or not engage with them. The choice is all yours. I've only used Aria for a brief amount of time, but my experience with it has been incredible. It's been super helpful with researching topics and coming up with titles and keywords and all that good stuff that we use in our videos on a daily basis. I mean, it's the closest I'm going to get to having my own personal Jarvis, and I love it so much. Be sure to use the link below, download Opera, and start browsing like the hero I know you are. And thank you so much again to Opera for sponsoring this video. And now, Mr. Feige, I turn my attention back to you. I think it's important to understand why I, and others like myself, are even taking the time to write up pleas such as this one. It's plain and simple. We love Marvel, and for a long time, we loved the MCU, Kevin. You oversaw the creation of something that has never been successfully achieved before, and it was beautiful to watch blossom and grow. Characters felt like individuals with their own agendas and goals. They each brought their own personalities to the table, and the actors felt like they were in service of characters and not just playing a version of themselves. And all of these films, all of these characters were enjoyable to watch on their own, but incredible to watch when they all came together. Every movie stood out, and while some were definitely stronger than others, they were still unique. Films were made with the characters in mind first and foremost, and the lore and interconnectivity second. You know, the way stories should be told. Sure, there was probably a vague direction of where they wanted these characters to go in future installments, but it wasn't so explicitly charted out. There was room to pivot, to improvise, and improve based on what audiences were responding to and what the state of the world was, or whatever external forces were causing them to take creative detours from what they may have initially envisioned. These films could deviate and do their own thing. Look at the Guardians of the Galaxy films, or the Ant-Man films. I know, kind of a controversial thing, but those movies kind of rule, and they do their own thing really well. And they did it without worrying about the larger universe, and in turn, the larger universe would respond to the successes of the individual films. It's like improv. Yes, and instead of each movie existing to further the overarching narratives, they added to the tapestry of the universe and determined the direction. In Phase 2, for example, Iron Man 3 happened, Thor 2 happened, Cap 2 and Guardians, and so on and so forth. Iron Man 3 was a straight-up Shane Black film that dealt with Tony's PTSD and existential crisis following years of being Iron Man, triggered by a near-death experience in the Avengers. It was taking the character to a place he'd never been before, inward, making a beautifully insular cap on a character arc that began back in 2008. Thor 2 didn't work, so they revamped him and pivoted away. Cap 2 and Guardians were massive hits, and their respective successes informed what Phase 3 would look like. Kevin, you took what was working, what the audience was digging, and used that to help you figure out where to go with your universe. And the best part was that Cap 2 and Guardians of the Galaxy weren't trying to be anything more than compelling character pieces. These films didn't exist to serve a grander plan. They each would help determine what that grander plan would look like. Right now, it's stick to the script instead of yes and. Each individual project has less say in terms of the direction the franchise will go. They're just cogs in the machine instead of contributing, adding to the overall narrative that allows future filmmakers to play with what came before. As the Marvel's director DaCosta recently put it, it is a Kevin Feige production. It's his movie. The sad thing was, it wasn't always like that. It used to be Kenneth Branagh's Thor, Shane Black's Iron Man, James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy, and as much as I hate to say it, Joss Whedon's The Avengers. The MCU used to be like jazz, a flow of ideas where each film improvises. Each film could literally change the direction of the universe because you don't know what's going to happen next. Whereas now, well, we know what's happening because you told us. There's no mystery or excitement. We're just along for the ride. There's no consequence. And that's because, Kevin, you're too obsessed with the plan. No, not that plan. Here's the thing about the mythos of the plan. It's just that. A myth, a legend, an overinflated piece of hyperbole, aka marketing material used to give reason to why the Infinity Saga was such a massive success. The truth is, if you do any amount of digging or read the incredible new book, MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios, you'll come to understand that the oh-so-glorious plan wasn't as concrete as we all thought it to be. I'm not sure if you remember, Kevin, but the plan didn't come into play until much later in the game with the Infinity Saga, once you'd already figured out who your characters were and what, narratively, was and wasn't working. You introduced Thanos on a whim in the Avengers because Joss Whedon was a massive nerd and thought it'd be a fun thing to do. Sure, there was an outline of where you wanted the story to go, but it was a narrative that could be easily course-corrected, altered, could change. The last couple of films is really only when you fully committed and planned out what the Thanos thing was going to be. And it worked because it was the grand finale. The groundwork had been laid, we cared about the characters, watched them grow, and now it was time to pit them up against the ultimate adversary. People like Civil War, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the Infinity Saga. Did it theoretically lead to the Avengers being divided and an easy win for Thanos? Sure, but I'm not necessarily thinking about that when I'm watching Infinity War or Civil War. Civil War as a film itself had nothing to do with a single Infinity Stone, and that's okay. I loved that about that film. There's no room for anything like that in whatever phase we're in right now. The fact is, things got way too unwieldy, and Kevin, you tried to make everything conform to a plan. You shouldn't have committed to the next saga right after a huge one ended. You should have just made movies as a way to find the next saga instead of the other way around. I want to be excited for a new Captain Marvel movie, not just going to see what this stepping stone leads to in the future. And when you have marketing material that hints at the possible appearance of an X-Man in the post-credits scene of the movie, you really don't have faith in the film itself being what people are going to see. They're just going for the cameos and the nostalgia and blah blah blah, so we don't have to put in the effort because this is just here so that we can build to the next thing and the next thing and the plan. There's work to be done, and Kevin, this period of rest in between MCU films might be your last chance to do something about it. It also doesn't help that you're announcing your plans so far in advance. You didn't give audiences a chance to miss you, to come down from the massive high that Infinity War and Endgame give us. You sprinted towards the next saga and laid all of your cards out on the table. Secret Wars, Multiverses, Kang, all of that. Look, I'm sure many of us could have guessed that Secret Wars would be coming down the pipeline, but surprise us, for God's sake. Announcing your projects so far in advance because you've meticulously planned them out does a couple of things. One, audiences now have a certain set of expectations, and because so much emphasis is placed on the multiverse, when one of these projects like Hawkeye or Moon Knight or one of my favorite things you've ever done, Werewolf by Night, isn't about that, they feel aimless. We get announcements of upcoming Marvel projects, sometimes years before they're slated to come out. It puts them under a microscope, and it does that for a very long time. When we know exactly where the universe is heading, we cut out some of the best parts of early MCU movies, which, at least for me, included the communal speculation. Look, it's great to have ideas. You should, please, dear God, have ideas, but this time around, instead of being loosey-goosey with the ties in the Infinity Saga, instead of it being little things that would amount to something, you went in and told everyone what was significant right off the bat. And that sort of brings us to the whole Jonathan Majors Kang thing, the idea of what do you do with this guy now that we built him up to be the biggest thing since Jesus Christ?
I am Kang!
It wouldn't have been an issue if you had just let the third Ant-Man movie be an Ant-Man movie instead of trying to make it this big launching pad for the new saga. But look, I get it, Kevin. Maybe you're really passionate about Kang the Conqueror. That's cool. Here's your fucking solution. Recast him. It's so easy because variants exist. And who cares, man? Jonathan Majors, all things aside, with his problematic personal life, is a great actor. But the truth is, he's replaceable because the character comes first. You spend so much time hyping up Jonathan Majors that you feel obligated to not bail. You have an out, but you continue to keep making it harder on yourself. And now, because you're in this tailspin, if you want to believe the rumors, Marvel wants to rush Dr. Doom out to save everything, to be their new big bad, because they won't recast Kang the Conqueror. That is insanity. Doom should be introduced in Fantastic Four. I'm sorry. Like, let those guys take center stage at this point. To cap it all off, I don't know why, Kevin, you drew out integrating the X-Men into the MCU for so long. Outside of Spider-Man, they are the most popular characters in Marvel Comics. They should have been prioritized during the onset of Phase 4, and it's really what you should have led with. There's a deficit of strong central characters in your cinematic universe, and you were gifted with the return of your most popular heroes. Why on earth are you dragging your feet on bringing them to the big screen? Maybe we could have had 1 or 2 X-Men films by this point. Who knows? Maybe that's wishful thinking, but it also doesn't help when you're bringing back the legacy Fox characters. Do you really think those are the only versions of the characters people care about when they think of X-Men on the big screen? Characters can and should be remixed and reinvented. I want to know what the MCU's version of the X-Men and mutants looks like detached from what Fox did. Add on top of that the pivot to TV, which in my opinion was a massive mistake. Kevin, you and the boys have not only overextended yourselves, but you've planned out the shows so much that they don't even feel like TV. They feel like film ideas that you've adapted for TV to speed run the build-up process. The fact that you had to learn that showrunners were important to the success of, oh, I don't know, a television show is insane to me. This isn't how you properly lay groundwork for your next big story, and I know you know that. The thing about plans is that they should always be allowed to change when presented with new information, and it's really easy to change the plan if you don't tell us. With the MCU now, you've told us too much, which made you afraid of retconning because you want to be overconfident and infallible, but instead are stuck with mediocrity because you can't change anything and aren't willing to admit you've made mistakes. They got cocky and then started just announcing an absurd amount of stuff unnecessarily far in advance, and look what that got us. Among other things, a Blade movie starring one of the greatest actors of our generation in purgatory because they can't figure out how Blade fits into the plan instead of just letting it be a fucking Blade movie. It's insane to me that Blade was anything more than a sub-$100 million movie. That shouldn't have been something you had to reconsider. It should be more creatively driven by a filmmaker required to get artsy in order to stretch a modest budget. It's a vampire movie, for crying out loud. Do what you did with Werewolf by Night, but with Blade. Steep it in genre and atmosphere. That's how you not only create a compelling and fun Blade movie, but that's how you should be approaching all of your films. Before we wrap up this letter, we should, nay have, to talk about the firing of Victoria Alonso and the problems with VFX burnout of those working post-production for the MCU. The witch hunt that's begun since things started trending downward for Marvel kind of speaks to the isolation of you, Kevin Feige, from responsibility when it comes to studio blunders. It's the George Lucas effect, and I love George Lucas, but when you're surrounded by yes men who will do anything for you because you're the mastermind that built the MCU, that's not necessarily the greatest thing. You've never really suffered the indignation of owning a failure so that you can learn from it and try to do better next time. When you're changing things last minute, you can't expect the VFX artist to respond and overwork just to accommodate your shifting ideas so that they adhere to the grand plan. You gotta take some responsibility here. When the whole company treats you like a deity because you've owned the success of the Infinity Saga, no one is going to speak up. And why should they, when the ones that did have been removed from the equation? You lost James Gunn, Kevin, one of the strongest players on your team, because there were better offers in other places, because you abandoned him when you needed most. And Kevin, don't be surprised if that loss becomes your #1 competitor. You lost the guy who actually understood that you need heart and empathy, and we need to care about these people in order for the films to be successful. It's not about the connections, it's about the stories. In summation, Mr. Feige, we're begging you, I'm begging you to let the creatives do their thing. Let them be the guiding force that forms your universe and figures out the direction of whatever phase we're going to be in, and that you start to take more of a back seat, start to develop a democracy, and begin to move away from this monarchy you've created. I truly hope this is the last time we'll have to have a chat like this, and maybe you'll find a new method of moving forward that's similar to the suggestions covered in this letter. Or perhaps you'll come up with something even better. You've done it before, but regardless, please just do something. Because continuing down the path the MCU is on is a one-way ticket to jump the Sharksburg, and I don't want to step off this train just yet, even if you're kind of pushing me off of it. Happy holidays. Sincerely, Griffin.